My research is on carbon balance or carbon ecosystem carbon balance studies. And what I do is use remotely sensed data, so data from satellites and aircraft-based sensors, to study how the different ecosystems, like our forests and other ecosystems, how they're behaving in terms of taking in carbon from the atmosphere. And the whole need for this kind of study is that in the global climate change, carbon dioxide is a big player. So that means the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere helps to heat up the atmosphere. And trees take in carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, keeping the balance. But over the last some 50 or 70 years, this balance has been pretty much broken. We are producing more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere than the ecosystems are taking in. My current research is we are trying to understand the deciduous forests of eastern United States, including Indiana, that how much carbon in a year, in a given year, they're taking in, and how that is depending on rainfall or temperature patterns, so that we can predict what this forest will do in next 20 years, 50 years, etc. This year, we are concentrating on this Morgan Monroe State Forest. So we are trying to understand how this small area, or relatively small area of forest, works. We are collecting data from the ground level. We are collecting data using a cherry picker. We are collecting data using a tower that's set in the forest for the last few years. And then we are flying an airplane, collecting data, and then also we are using NASA satellites and trying to see that at a tree level, at a canopy level, at a small area level versus the whole forest level, how these forests are working in terms of taking in carbon dioxide. Whatever happens in one part of the world is important for other parts, just because we live in the same world and same atmospheric system. Carbon cycle science is in fact important for every place. It doesn't matter where we put in carbon dioxide, where the global atmosphere is one thing, one system. In terms of taking in of the carbon dioxide, trees play a big role. And Indiana has large chunks of forest. These forests, throughout the whole growing season, taking in carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And if we can tell, if we can understand how much carbon is being taken in, then we can see in terms of the global or national level that our state is doing this. We are trying to come up with the number that we can verify and tell that our forests in the state are taking in this X amount of carbon dioxide. My research is funded by NASA. And this is another important thing, that when people think of NASA, they may think it's all about the stars and the moon and astronauts. But in fact, NASA spends hundreds of millions of dollars studying our own planet. NASA's carbon cycle science started, it's almost like now 10 years or so, and it's an ongoing process. And NASA studies not just our country, not just the United States, but it's studying this whole carbon balance for all over the world. Whatever happens in one part of the world is important for other parts, just because we live in the same world and same atmospheric system. Over the last decade or so, different researchers, including myself, have brought in millions of dollars of federal grant money, federal research money that is being spent locally. We are also trying to figure out that what is the worth of our forest in terms of its financial value, in terms of its carbon intake value, and that our policymakers can use when they're bargaining in terms of carbon market, etc. We are trying to find out what our forests will do in future with this changed global temperature, rainfall patterns, etc. I can give one example. We have found out that in this area, in Indiana, southern Indiana, the fall color is coming later and later every year. Over the last 20 years, the fall color has been delayed almost 20 days. And people who are outdoors people, and in fact, I was talking to somebody who is a sailing instructor, and he said that he noticed in Lake Monroe that nowadays all the trees around the lake still have leaves, when 20, 30 years ago he used to see those leaves are gone. So if you're an outdoors person and if you keep a track of this thing, changes that are happening in our atmosphere, in our ecosystems, that are not just scientific, very small numbers or so. They're very visible now. This has to be a combined effort by scientists giving the policymakers unbiased data and results, and policymakers looking at those and then taking their decisions. Not just thinking about the commercial value, like cutting down a forest can allow, selling the wood and making some money, but what does it mean in terms of the water quality? What does it mean in terms of the air quality? What does it mean in terms of the standard of life, the people that live in that area? And science can give those data, those predictions, and hopefully our policymakers, our state policymakers can then look at all of those, plus the business value of cutting down a forest or selling wood, etc., and then take proper decisions.